So for me, it was just a matter of seeing my environment, seeing what I was growing up in, and sort of losing hope when it came to a financial future. What is Gen Z's future going to look like when it comes to financial security, financial stability? And I had a lot of fear in that as school was coming to an end for me. That was on the back of COVID, so the world just kind of looked like it was going nuts. And I was just going, what does it look like buying a house at this age? What does it look like? Is it realistic to buy a property? Is it realistic to pay off a house in under 30 years? Or is this something I'm going to have to commit my life to? But I made that pivot probably a year and a half to 2 years ago of only.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Orange Peel Podcast. I'm your host, Nikki, and today's video is literal proof that Gen Z isn't just watching Bitcoin from the sidelines. We're going all in. Today's guest is Joey, who's better known online as SatsVenture, and he's only 21 years old, and he's already committed his time, energy, and entire future to Bitcoin. We're going to be talking about why he chose Bitcoin over chasing meme coins, why long-term conviction matters much more than short-term profit, and what it really means to be all in at such a young age. This one is going to be all about risk, reward, and it's a message to every Gen Z listener who feels stuck in a broken system. Joey, thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to dive straight into your journey.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you. Looking forward to this one. I always love getting invited onto shows. It starts to make you feel like a little bit of a Bitcoin celebrity, but I love it. I love coming onto channels like this, so looking forward to it.
All right, well, to kick things off, you're so young, and I feel like most people our age, they're stuck figuring out their first jobs or getting through uni, but you're on a completely different path. You are into Bitcoin. What made you go down this route?
So for me, it was just a matter of seeing my environment, seeing what I was growing up in, and sort of losing hope when it came to a financial future. So I saw, my parents comfortably buy a house and they were progressing, and I saw my grandparents well off. And then it sort of got to my age and it was like, what is Gen Z's future going to look like when it comes to financial security, financial stability? And I had a lot of fear in that. What does it look like buying a house at this age? What does it look like? Is it realistic to buy a property? Is it realistic to pay off a house in under 30 years? Or is this something I'm going to have to commit my life to? And during that time, I started to look for a way to maybe make my money go further. And so I discovered crypto, I discovered meme coins and that whole world. And so around 17 years old, I started to put basically my whole life savings in crypto, not Bitcoin, very separate things. And at the time, it was probably only 7,000 Australian dollars, which was quite a bit for a 17-year-old. It was money I'd saved up. It was money that my parents had put away for me, and I'd just been stacking on top with a little petrol station job. And, I'm swapping coins and I'm doing all these things and I'm ignoring Bitcoin because at the time it was 100,000 Aussie dollars, which is about 60,000 US dollars. And I remember going, okay, that's already had its run. People told me that used to be $1. Did you know that, number one Bitcoin used to be $1 and now it's 60,000 US dollars. And I thought that's too late. Let's look at Ethereum. I bought an Ethereum, then I ended up nearly getting 2 Ethereum. And I was going down this whole, what's the next Bitcoin? What's going to be the next gem that people say where you can make your money? So it's obviously not Bitcoin. Bitcoin's already had its run. That was my mentality. And so it really was just trying to get rich as fast as I could, going, I'm really not going to be able to get a house deposit soon. So how can I get that house deposit faster? Like, I'm not going to be able to get it working at this petrol station job. I'm not going to be able to get it if I go to uni straight out of school because there's HEX debt. So there's debt in Australia when you take on uni, which is similar to a lot of colleges around the world. And so I was going, how do I get the house as fast as possible? Buy crypto, trade these things, buy in the bear markets, sell in the bull markets. And then as the bear market really hit me hard and I started to lose my entire life savings and try to explain to my parents, hey, that money I had, that is essentially gone. And that was kind of an interesting experience, but it really woke me up to the reality of crypto, going, not everything is green, not everyone's a winner. And it's actually really hard to try and time the market. It's really hard to trade these things. It's really unpredictable. You're putting your future and your hands into essentially a CEO of a token or company, and it's not a matter of magic money. It's not a matter of, everyone wins. And so as the bear market came and we're going into, I suppose, the next Bitcoin bull market, I sort of went, why is Bitcoin ripping and everything else is getting destroyed? Everything else continues to do these 80% drawdowns. Things are really getting ugly here. and I was still holding crypto. And Bitcoin was doing a 6 or 7x from recovery from all-time bottoms. So I started to move some allocation into Bitcoin without the understanding. And then I started to study it, started to understand what it was. Oh, it's got a finite supply. That's interesting. Oh, it doesn't have a CEO. It doesn't have someone that can make more tokens. There's no one that can essentially dump the market or manipulate the market to an extent of failure. And so that was just the rabbit hole, and like we can deep dive into that. But I made that pivot probably a year and a half to 2 years ago of Bitcoin only. And from there, yeah, I've just been all in at 21. I got married and I convinced my wife, hey, this is something I think is really good for our future. I don't want to dabble in crypto anymore because she knew me doing all that. But I want to settle and treat Bitcoin as a savings account rather than an investment. So that's where I'm at.
But you mentioned that Bitcoin is very, very different from crypto. And while you were diving into the Bitcoin rabbit hole, what did you see in Bitcoin that made you choose it over every other form of investment?
For me, it was like, it's so clearly not a business. It's so clearly not tied to a CEO. So when a business or a technology is released, it's usually for profit. It's usually for some sort of, I guess you could almost say, selfish gain, where it's the person that's releasing it is trying to make as much money as possible. Whereas Bitcoin was really interesting because it's essentially a protocol that was released to the world. Satoshi says in his white papers that he discovered Bitcoin and he kind of just figured out how to release it. So that's a lot different to Ethereum or XRP and all these other, I would class as technologies or even just tokens. They almost just represent a company. So Bitcoin's different in that aspect, and technologies can be built on top of protocols. And so Bitcoin as the base layer, as the network, as the protocol can then have other layers. So this is where we see layer 2. This is where we see Liquid and Lightning and all these other things built on top of it. And so you need a really strong base layer, and I think Bitcoin is that. Whereas these other cryptos, I would say, even if some of them have quote unquote layers, they really are extremely centralized to the point that they are relying on the head of their company, on the head of their token. And so without the constant tweaking of the person running the show, they essentially trend to zero and they all fail against Bitcoin. And I think if you put any other crypto against Bitcoin, it's so obvious to me that Bitcoin is the superior store of value, the superior place to put your capital over a long period of time. It essentially functions as money, and money needs to be saleable across time. Whereas I would argue that XRP, Ethereum, Solana, are they going to have a store of value in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, zoom out? And I think that's so unpredictable. And at this point, it's leaning against no. And so Bitcoin has 16 years of essentially being a protocol, a network that has now provided, I guess, a finite money to the world. And that's done it very successfully. And I think there's no reason to try and piggyback off it and try and replicate it, which a lot of cryptos try and say, we're the next Bitcoin, we're the silver to Bitcoin. Whereas Bitcoin's its own thing, man. And I think it, as a store of value, it competes with, I would say, digital property, but also digital gold. And it competes with every other asset class. And if there's $900 trillion worth of things in the world, of value in the world, then there's no reason Bitcoin can't eat 10% of that or 20% of that, because it can act as an asset class. It can act as money. And that's a lot more special than something like XRP as a payment rail for centralized banks, or Ethereum, where it's like all these DeFi things built on top and it's the internet money and it's this and it's that. And it's like, those things are cool and maybe they're cool technology, but it's not somewhere I want to put my money long term. And I can speculate and I can gamble, but at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a savings account. I can't say the same for Ethereum, and I can't say for the rest of the cryptos. Bitcoin to me is the only one that's going to be a store of value over a long period of time. It's the only one with a finite supply, and it's not dictated on a CEO, a company, a government, or a country. It is its own thing. Anyone that joins it feeds it as much as it feeds them. And it doesn't matter whether you're rich or you're poor or you're red or you're blue. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian, a Muslim, or a Buddhist. Anyone can buy Bitcoin and appreciate what it does for them. And that's basically sovereign money. And a sovereign store of value. So that's sort of how I dictated what was different.
Right. But if you're surrounded by crypto friends, if they see random coins like Solana pump overnight, how do you justify your decision to stay focused on Bitcoin? Are you not drawn to those short-term profits?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I'm struggling with now, because I have friends that are in altcoins still, and they'll text me and go, I told you Ethereum was going to break an all-time high. I told you it was worth waiting and things, because they knew I used to be involved in that. And it's like, guys, like for the last 4 or 5 years, you have been stressed out of your brains. Like you literally have lost sleep over this. They go home, they check the laptops, they're checking the charts, they're reading Twitter, they're trying to do quote unquote research, but at the same time, it's really just looking for hope and copium. And so they're really just trying to cope in those periods. Whereas you hold Bitcoin, I do not have that feeling. I don't know about you, but I'm so convicted with my decision, confident with my decision. I understand where this thing's headed, and I don't need a 10x overnight. I'm happy with, say, a 10x over 5, 10 years, but it's with a lot higher certainty than a lot of these altcoins. A lot of these altcoins, they rely on the advertisement of their own CEOs. They rely on hype. They rely on community. And those are basically their sole foundations. Bitcoin has an element of community and it needs people to join the network to thrive, but that's one element to it. Yes, you're going to see 10x's and you're going to see 100x's, but how do you pick the right one? Because the rest of them, the 99.9, trend to zero. They fail. They take your savings and you get rug pulled. If you get lucky and you get a 5x, a 10x, X, whatever it is, if you're not then swapping that to Bitcoin and understanding that Bitcoin is scarce and that's where you can hold your profits and that's where you can supposedly trade the altcoin season into the bull run for Bitcoin, then if you're just trading back into fiat, then you're just feeding the very system that puts you in that predicament, that puts you in the spot that you wanted to gamble and speculate. There's no point finally getting the millions of dollars, going back into the fiat system and spending on nice cars and whatever, and having no store of value for a long period of time. So you want to be able to, if you do get lucky, swap that straight into Bitcoin. No point going straight back into fiat. But I think a lot of the crypto bros are just here to try and make more fiat, whereas I'm actually just trying to store my time and energy over a long period of time. Like, will the fiat system even be around in 5, 10 years, 20 years? I'm not sure. So I just don't think trying to get to millions of dollars in cash is the best play here. I think I'm trying to leave that system, join a new system. And it feels really exciting and it feels like I'm contributing to something. I'm contributing to other Bitcoiners in the space, whereas you would not find that in an altcoin market, in an altcoin community. It is basically who can win and who can lose, whereas Bitcoin's like, hey, let's all just leave that system, join the new one and enjoy it, like enjoy the ride. So there's going to be temptations to join, and I've already had those things with my mates going, hey, buy this coin. I heard it's going to do this, it's going to do that. And I hope it does for them. But I'm convicted on Bitcoin. I want to hold Bitcoin. I'm not here for the 10x gains overnight, but I'm here for the long-term vision. I've seen where it's been the last 16 years and I know where it's going to a degree for the next 16, and I want to be a part of it. So I feel like that's where we stand.
That is a perfect setup actually for the biggest picture, because what I really want to drill down on this segment is diving into that short-term hype versus the long-term hope with Bitcoin, and how Bitcoin is basically our way out of the fiat system. So do you think being all in at 21 then, does that give you an edge because you've got so much time and so many decades ahead to let your conviction just play out?
Yeah, I think being younger, and I think like we're both fairly young, is an advantage with when it comes to this sort of knowledge and this conviction, because it allows us to, we know what the superior savings technology is in our generation, and we figured that out early to a degree. So some people would say, no, you're late, like it's 16 years in. But if this is an asset that's not a 16-year project or a technology, it's now past $2 trillion, and this is something that could potentially be around for 100 years, if not 1,000 years. When you put 16 years as that's really the start, like it's such a blip in time. And I would almost say that this asset class wasn't real until about early 2024, when it was listed as a commodity, when it was listed as its own asset class, when it wasn't just a Pokemon collectible token. And so it's really become a real asset, a real store of value. And that's pretty obvious to institutional demand, but also publicly traded companies, but also countries and governments. To me, it almost feels like there's been a switch, and that's been at the start of 2024. And so I feel extremely lucky to be 21 and knowing that this thing could potentially be not only $100,000 a coin, but maybe $1 million, 10 million, and 100 million's not out of reach in my lifetime, considering how much they're printing, considering how many other assets are so illusionary. There's no reason that one Satoshi couldn't equal $1 in our lifetime. I think that could be where we're headed. And I always struggle with how much Bitcoin I have, because I'm in these Bitcoin group chats where they're like, hey guys, I'm thinking about selling my $1 million house and going all in on Bitcoin. Thoughts? And I'm just like, that sounds awesome, but I cannot compare. I have no capital. Like, I'm 21. I'm down to zero fiat. I don't own a house. I even sold my car. And it's like, I can't pull any financial strategy to get more other than considering taking on debt. And so it's just an interesting spot because I go, damn, I wish I had that opportunity to get 10 Bitcoin from selling a house or whatever it may be. Same with my dad. Like, I orange pilled my dad last year and he already has more than me. And it's like, that's so annoying. What was the point of 4 or 5 years of going down this whole crypto and then Bitcoin rabbit hole? But you have to acknowledge, like, the older people, they would trade all their Bitcoin to be 21 years again. Understanding how lucky it is to be alive in Bitcoin, but also at this age, you got to take that, you got to be very grateful. And I think understanding it now means there's no cap on how much Bitcoin you can try and get to, or dedicating your savings and your time to it. I think you'll reap the benefits. And I think it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter about getting to a whole coin. Like, I don't have a whole coin, but that's a dream. Maybe one day I'll get to, but it's like, it really doesn't matter. This is so finite and scarce that even this is when people say 0.01 is a big deal. 0.1 is a big deal. Like, do not worry about trying to get that whole coin because it almost seems too far away. And I think it is for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are priced out, but it's like, that is so irrelevant. Its price is so irrelevant. The fact that you can try and get a little piece of this, even like, 1 Satoshi, then 10 Satoshis, then all the way up to whatever you can get to. If you can get something that's scarce, it's eventually going to have the whole world's eyes on, the whole world's demand on. If it goes like the internet to 66% global adoption and we're at 4%, it's kind of inevitable that it's going to explode in some sense. And that means the price as well. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a lucky time to be alive. It's cool that we get to be a part of this. And it's awesome to be a part of it young rather than later.
Time is our biggest asset, I think. I was having a conversation with Robin Sayre just yesterday, actually, and he really drilled down on that point. He was mentioning the same thing about even just getting to like 0.1 for Bitcoin puts us in that like super old, like all the rich boomers that we see driving around with the Ferraris, like brings us up to that point basically in just a decade or two. But speaking of savings, how did Bitcoin change the way that you thought about, your savings and for your future? Let's talk about, your money habits, your saving habits.
Yeah, for me, understanding like the scarcity, like once I figured that out and how many Satoshis like I should be trying to get to or how much I can save just week by week, it really pulled in my spending habits. Going through school, even when I was dabbling with crypto and stuff, it's like I would buy like really expensive hoodies and I would buy stupid brands and all this just to, look like you've got the bling. And I think a lot of people would rather live in an like illusionary system where it's like, hey, if I can take out $100,000 loan and buy a nice car, then they'll think I'm successful. So there's so much like I have to look the part that I'm really not just to feel like I've done something. So it's just like fake it till you make it type thing, which is what we're living in. Like young people with credit cards, debt and, car debt, and even I'd say home debt where they're buying houses they literally can't afford, but they want to be able to invite people over and be like, this is all mine. That is the world we live in. And I think that's kind of sad. Like, nothing's reality anymore. It is really just like, hey, take a reality check. You essentially have like a negative net worth. And that's a lot of young people. It's like you are negative. And so that's a scary thought. And I think young people need to actually pull their spending habits in because they're sort of a product of their environment. I think a lot of people weren't spenders. This is a new thing and it's just consume, consume, consume. And I think it's a product of our environment where everything's an illusion, everything's on loans, everything is just propped up by a printed dollar. And so even without knowing how money works, young people go, my dollars are worth less tomorrow than they are today, so I might as well spend. So they might not say that in their head, but I think inherently it's in us to go, let's just consume because life's getting more and more expensive. You only live once, YOLO. Let's go on that trip. Let's buy that car. Let's take out that loan. Let's get that credit card. Let's just enjoy life, man, because look, our future's not looking too good. I don't think I'll ever buy a house or I'm waiting on my boomers to pass on the wealth. It's like we're all in this awkward, like spend as much as you can, bring the future forward and spend it now. That's just a sad spot we're all in. And I think we need to fix that. And I think the only way we fix that is sound money, and that's Bitcoin. And it gives you a reason to save. It gives you a reason to trade your time and energy for a money that's actually going to be worth something in the future, not just the same as it was, but more. Like Your purchasing power with Bitcoin goes up. So my life saving in Bitcoin as my primary savings account, as Bitcoin goes up, then my life just gets cheaper and cheaper. And people don't understand that, but it's like, that is a reality. It's like, as Bitcoin's price, it's really just net worth growth. As that goes up, the fiat system continues to die more and more and more. It gets weaker and weaker and weaker because we're trying to replace the system. It's like a silent protest, and we are just coming in and we're taking their spot. And yeah, I just think the sooner you join it, the better. And it will change your spending habits for the better because you understand, hey, I've got a bright future here. I just really need to lock in, get as many Satoshis as possible. And that's all I have to do. I just have to trade my time and energy for the Aussie dollar, the US dollar, and swap that into Bitcoin and hold it as long as I can, because the longer I hold it, the more I will reap. And so doesn't mean you sit around and quit your job because you got a little stack of Bitcoin. It means no, work hard, and actually try and get as many Satoshis as possible because you know where this is going. So that's sort of my point of view on, that's how it's changed my spending habits. And even things like having junk around the house, I'll just sell it now and go, I know it's going to be there for 5 or 10 years because I'm not going to touch it. I'll just sell it. So, an example just before the next question is like, I had a snowboard and some really good snowboard stuff for the winter season, and I tore my ACL. And so I knew I wouldn't be able to go snowboarding for at least a year or two. And I said, you know what? While it's really good quality and everything, I'm just going to sell it. Probably made over $1,000. Well, not made. I got back $1,000 and put that all into Bitcoin. And if I ever want to go snowboarding again when I have my surgery or whatever it is with my knee, I'll just be able to buy it again because I made that much in Bitcoin. Like it's really cool that you can do that. It really gives products and things around your house a second life. So that's kind of how I would say it.
I think so many people our age so obsessed with wanting these super quick wins to obviously fund those spending habits that you were talking about. But they're so into, trading or going into the S&P 500, regular index funds, or any sort of side hustle, right? But why do you think that Bitcoin is kind of, I don't want to say the best place for us to go right now, but probably one of the top things for us to put our money in?
I kind of think that it is the best place at this point. Like, the scary thing with saying that is because it's like, I shouldn't be giving financial advice. And so I do agree. Like, this is not financial advice. This is almost like a concept and an idea. Like, hey, what if you used Bitcoin as your savings account? What does that look like? Well, 16 years tells you it's the superior place to put your capital. And what's interesting is I was listening to Jack Moller's podcast today, and he was talking about how everything in the fiat system is so propped up by an illusionary dollar that's so credit based that if you really stripped it back, it's like gold as just a rock, as a fundamental store of value that's worked for thousands of years, which people argue is basically eternal because it literally goes back to the start of the Bible in Genesis. It literally will talk about gold. And so it's been around forever. And that has outperformed the S&P 500. That has outperformed real estate. And it's literally just a, base fundamental bear instrument, gold. And so the stock market is down 20% against gold, and all gold did was stay as a rock, as a shiny rock. And it's like, that's crazy. And that's just proof that even with the crazy numbers of Apple going up and Amazon and going up and all these things, none of them can do as well as a bear instrument. And so Bitcoin is another bear instrument. This is how I see it. It's like, it comes in and it's basically digital gold. It's basically here to replace gold as the store of value. So it rocks up, and actually outperforms gold. So it's the first time an asset has come, and basically for 16 years straight, 15 years straight, whatever you want to put a time frame on, and it is destroying gold in gains as a store of value when you hold for a minimum of 4 years. And then especially if you can get to a 10-year hold, like if you zoom back 10 years ago, Bitcoin was extremely cheap. Like Bitcoin was something you could actually obtain and get a hold of. And now it just feels impossible. So ever since we got off the gold standard, the fiat dollar has been destroying us. It has been robbing the saver. It robs the saver and rewards the asset holder. And so us young people, we don't have assets. So we are considered savers. And so we're getting absolutely destroyed. So that's just, Bitcoin as a bear instrument is the best place to be putting your capital. And once you understand that is what made me want to go all in. It is essentially gold, and there was never a reason to not hold gold. And so I think the only thing that's ever upset that is Bitcoin. I think gold has worked for thousands of years. Gold has worked forever, but Bitcoin's here now. And I think it's time to leave the shiny rock, and we actually found a better sound money with a finite supply, because even gold, it's basically abundant in the earth. Like, it's just that we haven't scraped those surfaces or collected those golds. Like, even gold mining companies will leave the gold they found because they don't want to increase the supply too quick. So they'll go, oh, there's this huge nugget or whatever, it's going to do this to the market, there's this much gold we have here, let's wait and release it slowly, because we don't want the price to come down, because more supply means a price shock down. And so the very fact that we almost have an abundance of gold, but it's like treated as this extremely finite asset, is interesting. And I think when that gets exposed and people will start to flee to Bitcoin as an actual cap of supply, an actual finite supply, and such scarcity that we've never seen, yeah, it really is the best place to store your capital.
So I don't know if you've seen this, but I was having a conversation with my friend about this just the other day. There's a lot of people on TikTok right now who are preaching about putting our money back into gold, putting it back into silver. And I think the way I see it, where I'm seeing a lot of Gen Z pick gold and silver over Bitcoin because they see it as maybe just another gamble or just another crypto, just another meme coin. So if you're talking to another Gen Z student, right, who thinks Bitcoin is just maybe another gamble, what do you say to kind of counteract?
So I see the desire when it comes to going back to fundamentals. So silver and gold, like what I touched on there, gold did work for thousands and thousands of years. And in time of panic and in time of uncertainty, which is what I would say we're in right now, with wars going on, stock market sort of being unstable, with China wanting to leave the New York Stock Exchange and pull out of American markets. I would say if Bitcoin didn't exist, I would be going gold and I'd be going silver. But I think if you deep dive into Bitcoin, and the reason that I say it could be 100-year or 1,000-year asset minimum, is because nothing can really take this thing down. Like, they've tried to ban it. Say they'll ban it in China and it would just get even stronger in China. They'll try and ban it in another country, or they'll tear down this exchange, or they'll increase the capital gain tax or whatever. But those holding Bitcoin in cold storage, backed by your own 24-word phrase that was randomly generated, maybe you have a multi-signature, so you need 2 of the 3 devices to unlock. It's really the first time that you can actually take capital and a store of value and money into an offline mode, almost, for it to just sit there on ice, and you can't confiscate it. You can't tax something that's locked away and sort of in this like imaginary vault. Like, it doesn't even have to be a physical vault. And so it's the most secure thing to be holding. Like, look at Satoshi's wallet of 900,000 Bitcoin. Not a single one has moved. And it's like, that's such a money pot. Like, how has that not been hacked? And that, to me, is living proof that even with it sitting there, that much capital, like, it's almost going to pass Elon Musk's net worth as Bitcoin's price starts to rise again. And people can't get a hold of it. The best hackers in the world cannot unlock these wallets that are lost. So they predict there's at least 4 million Bitcoin that have been lost. And that is basically taking that supply off for good. And so Bitcoin actually can't even go to zero anymore. It's official that Bitcoin cannot trend to zero without those wallets getting unlocked and everything to be basically just released and sold to the market like a, sort of world-ending hack. And so, I don't know, it's just an interesting idea of like money you can take offline. Like, no wonder people are scared of it. No wonder people want to flee back to something physical. But yeah, like gold, like what I said with its supply, it's almost unpredictable. Like, someone could find $1 trillion worth of gold tomorrow and release it to, the market and bring that price right down, because as abundance comes, everything trends to zero. And so I just think that with the supply, I think silver, it's extremely abundant. It is so easy to find and use. And I just can't see how that's going to be a superior store of value. And we see multiple times in history where they've gone to silver as money, as a store of value, as a way that they will trade, and it fails. And so then they find gold again, and then they do gold again. And it's just a rinse and repeat of what's the best money in society. And as it constantly goes back to gold and then back off gold and tries seashells and tries beads and tries rocks, and what's going to be the hardest money and the sound money. And Bitcoin has proven that this is it. This is our best chance at sound money, and it cannot be confiscated. Like, imagine all the gold bugs right now in the countries that are getting blown up, and it's so extremely unpredictable if, a missile is going to land on your house or something, or even someone to come rob you. And imagine as a bomb is coming up to your house and you're trying to dig up at the backyard and try and grab your gold bars that weigh this many kilos, and you're trying to put them in your backpack and you're trying to get through border security and someone confiscates your gold. And because gold's one of those things that I've got the gold, someone can come in here right now with more manpower than me. Maybe it's literally a gun or a knife or something. They take the gold, it's gone. It's like security wise, it's really not what people say it is. And actually being physical is actually a flaw, not necessarily an advantage. And so you strip back the physical aspects of gold, and what do you get? You basically get Bitcoin. And so, yeah, I mean, I understand. I think we have a lot in common with gold bugs and precious metal advocates, but I just think they're missing the next superior store of value and the superior sound money, because Bitcoin eliminates the flaws that gold and silver had and basically makes things digital, makes things better, makes it more divisible, makes it more, it's absolute borderless. I can just send it anywhere. And so, yeah, you can look into all the aspects of Bitcoin, but it's superior to me in all aspects.
So I think, as Bitcoiners, one of the biggest advantages that we see in Bitcoin is obviously, as you were saying, it's not physical. There's getting into it, hacking it, increasing, decreasing the supply. It's impossible. And Gen Z is a very digital native generation. We grew up surrounded by the internet. We were handed phones at like the age of 10, 11. Wouldn't you say that this should be one of the advantages of Bitcoin in our eyes? I mean, obviously it's not. So why do you think, knowing that having a currency online, having a Bitcoin be completely decentralized, Gen Z is still so adverse to investing in Bitcoin? Is that just because, they don't understand it?
Yeah, I do find it interesting because like they're willing to accept that their bank account is digital credit. Like it's literally a number on the screen. And so you're not holding physical cash. And even if you were, it's like you're accepting the fact that this piece of paper that can be printed at any point without telling the people how much they're printing, extremely unpredictable money supply. You're willing to accept that as money and a store of value. You're willing to accept the fact that they can control the supply and be very, I would say, sneaky about it. And they're willing to accept those ideas and all these digital ideas. Like they're willing to accept how they use a phone and a computer and all these things that are digital. But when it comes to money, they cannot accept that there's a digital money that can be a store of value over a long period of time that's essentially here to replace physical things, which is exactly what the internet did, which is exactly what AI is doing. It's replacing physical things, physical labor, things that you can hold in your hands that's tangible. And it's basically stripping back all the things that stop it from working long term and making it something ready for the next 100 to 1,000 years. Like digital is the next thing. It's like, this has been unfolding. The internet's been unfolding for more than 30 years now. And it's like, how do we not have an internet native currency that's borderless, that everyone can actually use as a unit of measurement against everything else, digital or physical? And Bitcoin's just doing that. So I just don't know, we're at 4% and it feels 4% global adoption, which I think is a huge accomplishment as a protocol, but I think it has so far to go. Because if you talk to people on the streets, you talk to people your age, they are so clueless and so just out of that world that, man, it's just such proof that we're so early, because how is this not the most interesting thing right now? Like digital capital you can take offline essentially and hold for a period of time that's going to beat inflation, that's going to beat real estate and S&P and gold. It's like, that's an interesting idea to me. And now that it's past the $2 trillion asset mark, I can't see it going back. I think Bitcoin's either going to zero or it's going to 100 million. And so at this point, it's getting closer to 100 million because there's nothing has come to me that's gone, yep, Bitcoin could go to zero tomorrow. Like, at this point, it's like, no, this thing's just going. Like it's just going to $1 million and then 10 million and who knows, like maybe 100 million. So it's something that I think a lot of people ignore because the news, the media, their parents, their sister, their brother, their friends have just gone perceived idea, something that I have not proven or even looked into. I'm just going to assume it's a scam. I'm just going to assume it's a pyramid scheme. I'm just going to assume it's going to fail. Oh, it had a good run, 16 years, but it's going to fail. It's got to fail. Like this can't work. The fiat system is too strong. And it's just like, oh man, this Bitcoin is so overdue The system is so broken, so unfair, so rigged against us. And it's like, why would you not want to be a part of something that's here to replace your current circumstances? Like, your circumstances, no offense, suck. Like, how do you not want to why don't you want to take a shot and try something new that might get you out of this rut? And it's like, I don't know. I don't know why people ignore it, to be honest.
And, this brings me to the part that really, really matters, which is the message that you're trying to put out to Gen Z right now. We are at a point in the fiat system, in this era of economics, where we have it harder than every other generation has had before us. It is next to impossible to afford a house, to afford a car. Even to take a vacation during uni, it costs unfathomable amounts of money. We see a huge divide in our generation, right? I think a lot of us are trending towards financial nihilism, where you're starting to think that you're never going to own a house, you're never going to be able to buy a car. And others, be it a very small percentage, are trending towards Bitcoin. And I wanted to ask you, how does Bitcoin give us hope in this system? How does it give us hope when student debt and housing and inflation are making our future feel impossible?
Yeah, I think it just really strips back to the basics of being like, your time and energy should be at a store for the future. And I think we've lost that. So I think all the young people now just assume my life's just going to get harder and harder and harder. And no matter how hard I save or how hard I work or the extra shifts I do or this or that, it's like I'm never going to get anywhere. And so that feeling is getting stronger and stronger for young people. I would even say millennials feel that, not just Gen Z and anyone below that. I think that's really the culture at the moment. And it's like, this is the whole credit card thing and the whole loans and this and that. And when your country's in, like America's in like $37 trillion worth of debt. So if they were a company, they are doing terribly. Like, if you were to compare that to a business, like, they are one of the worst businesses ever, and other countries are just as bad or worse or whatever. And so when your country's in that much debt and your citizens are in that much debt, and it's constantly kicking a can further down the road, and knowing this house of cards has to fail, puts a lot of fear, I think, into young people. I think young people's mental health and hope for the future is just so bad right now. And so Jack Mollers always talks about, I think everyone should watch his recent Prague conference, where he basically says, like, we're at record highs of youth suicide and obesity and other health diseases. And I just think that's crazy. Like, I think we're seeing numbers from like World War I, World War II, of people that are still living with their parents till they're 30. That's now, if you were in that World War I, World War II phase, you have a better chance at buying a house and moving out of your parents than you do right now. And that is so crazy. Like, how are we at that point? And I think the US has officially, we are now on the decline for the average lifespan. And it's like, we've advanced so far in society and so far as humans, and we're in a decline for, lifespan. That's not right. Like, we should be, we should be living to 100 at least, or 120. And it's like, how are we going down? And it's just because of this constant society shift of being like, we do not care for not only, the bottom class, but the middle class is just getting wiped out. So we see it in our food, the quality of food. We see it in the house prices. We're getting priced out of houses, and we just see diseases and sicknesses getting worse and worse regardless of advancement. And so I think you really need to consider Bitcoin, because it's returning to a sound money, something that's hard to create. Therefore, it's not an inflationary system, but a deflationary system where prices trend to zero. And so things around you just get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And I think that's something that everyone needs. I think your raise at work, that's 2% a year, if you're lucky, will not keep up with 10% of dollar debasement, or whatever your country is. Maybe it's even worse than that. Your raise will never keep up with how much they're printing. And so when that clicks, you need to find an alternative money that has a finite supply. And I think we have that now. And so it's like, now that we have that, you don't need to be looking for other things. You don't need to be constantly speculating and investing in other things, when it's as simple as hold the best money and then you will be successful when it comes to having capital and enough money, I suppose, to even just fund a lifestyle, a house, and maybe a family one day. And so we've seen this shift of, it used to be one parent would work, the other one would stay with the kids. That is no longer reality. Like both parents have to work, even though it's like they should have a choice almost. And what we're seeing is, a young man at 21 used to have a house and be married and looking to have kids. And is that happening now? Like I would say no. I think people are scared of getting married. I think we see the divorce rates go up. And I just think it's such a product of the fiat system and having broken money, because the number one reason for divorce in not only America, but I think worldwide, is financial pressure and financial insecurity, instability. And so if you can fix that, and I think Bitcoin fixes that, then yeah, you can change the world. Fix the money, fix the world. And I think every young person should be having a second look, because it's really changed my life. And I'm assuming it's changed your life and your perspective on your future and what really matters, because you can strip back that financial stress and really appreciate those around you, but also appreciate passions and hobbies, and stop worrying about trying to work a 50-hour, 60-hour, 70-hour week, and just appreciate what you've got. And so, yeah, I suppose that's just sort of my little message to young people, and have a second look. That's all I got to say.
Which brings me to this. It is important to be appreciating, all the little things around you. But what is something that young adults, particularly in college right now, are able to do to start building towards their future, to start maybe increasing the amount of Bitcoin that they have?
I never went to uni or college or anything, so it's hard to speak. But I think there's a constant rush now to move out as soon as you can. And so if you're in a situation that maybe uni or college is close enough to your parents' house and you have a good relationship with them, do not rush to go rent somewhere just for that freedom or whatever, if you feel like it's going to put a lot of financial pressure. If you feel you can do it and stack some Bitcoin, then just go do it, because life is short, and enjoy that freedom. And I think it's healthy to leave your parents' house at stages in your life. But I think if you're someone that could live at home, and that's the only way you're going to stack some Bitcoin, then you might have to consider that. It might be worth looking into that as an option, just to save those extra dollars, pick up that extra shift, and stack some sats. I think also your spending habits. So maybe you are at uni and college, and so life is expensive, but what can you drop? Maybe you're drinking a lot during the weekend, which a lot of young people do, enjoy the parties, enjoy the socializing, and maybe that's good in moderation. But I think if you can reduce those sort of habits that you really don't need, that are actually probably worse off for you, and just try and cut your spendings, that might be the only way you stack Satoshis. I don't think cutting out the quality of your food is a wise choice. I think your health is your wealth. So I think still buy the eggs and steak instead of the Fruit Loops and 2-minute noodles. But there's some things you can compromise on. So your spending habits, your living situation, try and make it as cheap as possible. Maybe you do pick up an extra shift, because a lot of college people and uni people are casual at their jobs. See if you can pick up an extra shift and treat that as your Satoshi saving shift. So it's just that shift I will put into Bitcoin. And then other thing would be sell things around your house if you can. If you have things that you're not going to use, that you're not attached to, consider selling it, because where we are now with Bitcoin is it's not going to be long before Bitcoin's $1 million. And do you want to have some, or do you want to be on the sidelines? Do you want to still have that $200 item that you haven't touched for a few years sitting there, where, Bitcoin at $1 million US is a 10x, maybe that's actually worth $2,000. So I don't know, you got to really price things in Satoshis as much as you can, not just your time, but the things around you. And yeah, understanding where this is going. So you want to get as much as possible. So what can you do to get more? So maybe it means that you can't just drop out of your college or uni because this is your passion and this is the job you want to do. So stay in it. But how can you set up yourself for a future? What's going to be the fastest way that's going to pay off that debt you've taken for uni or college? And I think that's going to be Bitcoin. What's going to be the fastest way to get to a house? Stacking sats now, putting off buying a house now, and maybe buying it later when a house is less than a Bitcoin, or a house is half a Bitcoin, or 0.1 of a Bitcoin. Then you can buy a house. Why would you buy it now when the price is extremely inflated? You don't have any Bitcoin. You're going to take on $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 of debt here in Australia for a median house. Just be really wise with what you buy. Be really wise with what assets you involve yourself in and invest in, because Bitcoin is potentially the place to be putting your money, and you don't want it to go by and ignore it. So yeah, I think that's just a few tips that I've got. Yeah, that's sort of what I do, sell things around my house, reel in my spending. But I also enjoy life. Like I've moved out and I'm paying, rent every week. But that's a choice me and my wife have made because we didn't want to live with our parents. We wanted our own space. And so I've compromised on that. That's some Satoshis I could be stacking, but no, life is short. I want to be away from my parents for at least this period of life. And who knows, maybe I'll end up back with them if something like COVID happens again, or maybe I want to stack more sats. But until then, yeah, compromise a little bit, but stack some Satoshis.
I think if you're watching this and you're going to take anything out of this entire video, take that segment, take that advice. That is such incredible advice. And last thing, just because this podcast is called Orange Peel, I always like to ask if there's one thing that you could recommend. Maybe it's a book, a podcast, some other resource to help orange peel some of Gen Z. What is that one thing?
I think it's worth getting new books, like whether that's reading or Audible. I recommend The Big Print by Lawrence Lepard. I also recommend The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. There's also a book that a lot of people haven't mentioned. So you obviously can mention Bitcoin Standard and a few others that are really good as well. But I recommend Fiat Food. You search that one, and I think he has a little part where Saifedean Ammous, who wrote the Bitcoin Standard, he comes in as well and does a section. But that talks about the corruption of our food and how Bitcoin could potentially fix this, but also understanding how important it is to look after your health. And so he ties Bitcoin into that, which is really interesting. But also a book called, I think it's called Bitcoin, but it's from 2014 and it's by Dominic Frisby. That was written in 2014, which is crazy. And it's talking about Bitcoin, where its future could be. And this man must be an absolute visionary because he's talking about $120,000 Bitcoin, and he's talking about a world where there's altcoins trying to act like Bitcoin, and there's this and there's that and there's this distraction. And he's sort of being like, what if this Bitcoin thing does take off? And so reading that over 10 years later and being like, man, this thing was actually set to do this. Like, this isn't actually crazy. It was set to really unfold like this is interesting. So look out for that book, because I love the way he was writing that book, because it's almost like a story and what was going on at that time, who was involved in Bitcoin's initial, I suppose, like release and discovery. And so that's a book I think people should be looking out for. And it's a good one to share with friends and family, because they'd be like, damn, this was actually set to happen. It's not just by luck or chance.
Awesome. I have never heard of Fiat Food, so I'm really glad that you mentioned that. I need to get that on my TBR. Almost immediately. And I think that's a perfect end to this video. This was such a strong conversation. Thank you so much for being here. And if you're watching this, being all in at 21 is not just about investing. It's about choosing to have this conviction over this short-term hype, maybe choosing hope over, financial nihilism and despair, and just proving that, Gen Z can own the future instead of being absolutely crushed by it. So take this as your wake-up call. Stop chasing all of the meme coins and all of the distractions. Start learning Bitcoin. And remember that the earlier you commit to a long-term mindset, the stronger your future will be. And as always, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay orange peeled. I'm Nikki, and I'll see you next week.